Grandpa's ranch wasn't just land. It was history. He bought it after returning from Vietnam, carved it out of raw earth with sweat and calloused hands. Over the years, it became a sanctuary. Oak-lined pastures, barns filled with weathered tack, a small lake at the far edge where cattle drank. That lake, however, held a secret, because it wasn't just water. It was a gator pond. The swampy end of the ranch had always attracted wildlife, but when Grandpa fenced it off decades ago, a small colony of American alligators made it home. He never tried to chase them out. Instead, he left it wild. "They keep poachers honest," he'd say with a grin. "Nobody sneaks across your land when they know something's watching from the water." By the time I inherited the ranch, the gators were practically legends. They weren't aggressive unless provoked, but anyone dumb enough to trespass on that side of the property was in for a nasty surprise. The HOA, of course, didn't like it. The board wanted to civilize the land. They demanded I drain the pond, fence the fields, and make the ranch community-friendly. To them, Grandpa's legacy was an eyesore compared to cookie-cutter lawns and manicured flower beds. I refused, flat out. That's when Karen, the HOA's self-appointed war general, escalated things. She brought in outsiders, hunters. Her plan was simple: claim the gators were invasive predators, then authorize hired hunters to control them. With the gators gone, she thought she could pressure me into draining the pond and selling off part of the land. But she didn't ask permission. She didn't file permits. She just opened the back gate one Saturday and let 3 camo-clad strangers march into my ranch with rifles. I was in the barn when I heard the gunshots. Not target practice. Not distant hunters. Shots on my land. I grabbed my phone and sprinted toward the tree line, heart pounding. By the time I reached the pond, the scene was chaos. The hunters had waited too close to the swampy bank, firing wildly at the water. The gators, furious and startled, erupted from the pond in a thrashing frenzy. One hunter dropped his rifle and scrambled up a tree, screaming. Another slipped in the mud and barely managed to crawl onto a log as jaws snapped inches from his boots. The third? He was knee-deep in muck, spinning in circles, trying to reload before the gators surged closer. Karen stood on the shore shrieking commands like a lunatic general. "Shoot them! Shoot them all! Clear the pond!" She didn't notice me at first, but the sheriff sure did. Because while I was running, I'd made one very important call. Sheriff McAllister pulled up with his deputies just as the gators cornered the hunters. He took one look at the chaos. Men trapped in trees, rifles sinking in mud, water churning with scales and teeth, and let out a low whistle. "What in God's name is this circus?" he muttered. Karen spun around, smug. "Finally! Arrest him! Arrest him! He's harboring dangerous animals. He let them attack licensed hunters on community property." McAllister raised an eyebrow. "Community property? Karen, this is the Jackson Ranch. Been in their family longer than you've been alive." Karen's face turned red. But they're predators. This is a safety hazard." The sheriff's grin was cold. "No, ma'am. This is called nature. And those men you dragged in here? Trespassers. Armed trespassers. That makes this a crime scene." While deputies hauled Karen aside, McAllister motioned to me. Together, we got the hunters out carefully. One by one, deputies threw ropes and shouted instructions until the men scrambled back to dry ground. Muddy, terrified, shaking. "You're lucky," the sheriff told them bluntly. "Those gators could have made short work of you. Count your blessings." The hunters, pale as ghosts, nodded. We didn't know," one stammered. "She said it was legal. She said the pond was fake." McAllister turned slowly toward Karen. "Fake? You told them this was a pond they could clear." Karen stammered. It's just water. I thought it was decorative." The sheriff barked a laugh. "Decorative? Lady, that pond's been registered with Fish and Wildlife since the 80s. Those gators are protected under state law. You just sent 3 men into a restricted habitat." The silence that followed was heavy. Then he added, "Congratulations, Karen. You've just bought yourself charges for trespassing, reckless endangerment, and possibly wildlife harassment. Karen's jaw dropped. Me? I was trying to help the community. No, McAllister snapped, his patience gone. You endangered lives, human and animal. The fallout was swift. The HOA's insurance refused to cover the stunt. Legal fees skyrocketed. Fish and wildlife got involved, slapping fines on the HOA for unlawful interference with protected wildlife. The hunters, embarrassed and angry, filed their own complaints. Not against me, but against Karen, for lying to them. By the end of the month, the HOA was broke. Their budget evaporated into court costs and fines. Dues skyrocketed. Residents revolted, and Karen was voted out in disgrace. As for the hunters, they never came back. One of them, I heard, quit hunting altogether. I'm done with ponds, he told a deputy. Done with swamps. Done with anything that splashes. But the best part? The Gators never left. They went right back to their routines. Sunning on logs, sliding into the water with lazy splashes, occasionally startling deer at the treeline. They didn't care about HOA politics. They didn't care about trespassers or lawsuits. They were kings of that pond, and they knew it. Grandpa would have laughed his head off. Months later, I hosted a barbecue at the ranch. Neighbors gathered. Kids ran through sprinklers. Music played. The pond shimmered in the distance, gators basking like statues under the sun. People weren't afraid anymore. They respected the pond now, knowing it had stood guard long before the HOA existed. Sheriff McAllister stopped by, plate piled high with ribs. He nodded toward the water. You know, he said, I've seen a lot of ways to scare off trespassers, but nothing tops a pond full of snapping gators. We both laughed, and somewhere out on the pond, a gator's jaw snapped shut like a gunshot, sealing the truth. The land was safe. The legacy lived on. And Karen? She learned the hard way that when you mess with a Jackson pond, you're not just fighting a neighbor. You're fighting nature itself.